Okay, so we're going to start the zipper waistband tutorial. Full disclosure before we start, I hate zippers, and there's probably a better way to do this, but it's the way that I do it. And if someone wants to figure out a better way to do this and share it with me, that would be awesome. So the first thing I do after I get everything cut out and choosing my zipper is I lay out my 7x10 and 3x10 squares, and this is where I use my double-sided tape, which is absolutely invaluable for this process. If you've ever tried to sew a zipper onto stretch fabric, especially spandex, without something to stabilize it, don't do it. I used to iron interfacing on here and pin my zippers in place, and this is tons better to do it this way. Go ahead and place that on there. And then it really doesn't matter which one you start with. Lay out your zipper right to left, left to right. Doesn't really matter. It's your preference. Peel off your double-sided tape. Flip my zipper. Flip it over. Stick it along here. Okay. Take it to my machine. I always have to think about this and how it's supposed to go. This is why I don't like zippers, but I've got a zipper foot on here using a straight stitch. I'm just going to stitch this zipper down. Stitched, and change our foot here. Come to the other side. Oh, come on. Love this double-sided tape, except when I don't. And we're going to stick this down. Oops. Stick that down and stitch the back side of the zipper on. There's zipper foot still, and I'm doing it the wrong way. Am I? I don't know. See, this is why I don't like zippers. I feel like every single time I do them, I'm starting over from scratch, figuring it all out. It's probably why I don't make bags, because zippers. I'm going to switch out my zipper foot, my regular foot, and I'm going to top stitch down these seams on the top here. If you wanted to press it in your iron at this point, you sure could. I don't, but you can if you want it to be a little bit easier as you're working this through your machine. Same thing on the other side. So now I've got my zipper top stitched in place, and I do that. No, I didn't do a very good job making it even. I usually try to have these even here, but this skirt's for me, so it's not as big of a deal. I do this not only because I think it looks nicer, but it also makes it sturdier. All right, so now that my zipper is sewn on, I am going to take it over to my iron, and I'm just going to press here, just kind of smooth things out a little bit. If you have not figured out good iron settings for your fabric, I recommend experimenting with a scrap, because these fabrics will melt if it is ironed too hot. And they're not all going to melt at the same spot. So some of the solid spandex swims are going to melt at a cooler temperature than maybe some of your customs will. So now that I've got this pressed, I'm going to fold it in half, kind of. No, I am going to fold it in half, but what I meant by kind of was I don't necessarily trust myself and trust that these bottom edges here lining up is going to make it be in half. What you want is you want your fold to be so that there's an equal distance from your zipper to this top fold, because that's what's going to end up in your zipper waistband. So I kind of eyeball it, but then sometimes I'll use a quilting gauge. Sometimes I'll use this ruler just to make sure that ultimately my zipper is straight. That looks pretty good. So now I'm going to iron this top fold. And I don't skip this step because this is how I line stuff up. All right, now it's time to start assembling this zipper waistband. And this is my main piece. I did iron this in half as well here off camera. So that is, I use that iron mark to line everything up. So kind of have to think about how this is going to line up and how it's all going to go. So I start by sewing the side without the zipper pull. And I'm going to do that, make sure this is easy to see here, by obviously flipping it over, right sides together. And I'm just making sure that this is straight. And so now I am going to line up. So my fold is here. I'm going to lay this fold on top of it there. So my fold matches up here, my fold matches up here. I'm actually going to scoot this piece a little bit more this way, still making sure it lines up, because when I stitch this down, I want to be as close to this zipper top as possible. I don't want all this garbage showing in my skirt. So I'm going to scoot it over about a ½ inch or so. past the edge of this. And I'm going to pin this in place. I can feel where the top of my fabric is there. So I like to put a pin at the top. I like to put a pin on my fold. I like to put a pin top part of my zipper. Oh, for Pete's sake. Oops. Get in there. To pin the bottom of my zipper. And one more down here at the bottom. Depending on whether or not the fabric is behaving itself and if it's lining up nicely, sometimes I will throw some extra pins in here. All right, so I brought this back, now that it's pinned, back over to the machine, and I'm going to sew along the side here. Now you can sew from this side or you can sew from this side. I prefer to sew from this side because then I can see this little zipper stop here and I can make sure that I avoid it. These, I like to tighten up my stitches, make them a little bit smaller. I reinforce everything on my zippers. I used to not, and they fell apart, and I didn't like that. So that's why everything is kind of reinforced. Oops, and my pin's stuck, because of course it is. Watching this part as I get close to it, slowing down, making sure that I'm not gonna hit anything that's gonna break a needle and send it flying, because nobody wants that. All right, once these pieces are sewn together down the side, I will open it up and top stitch it down. I do the top stitching for security because I used to not, and the stress on the seams in the waistband and people using the pockets made it fall apart, and that's uncool. I like to have it go away from the zipper pocket, so I've got everything facing that way. So that's what I'm gonna top stitch down. Extra threads out of my way. So I've got the one side here. Obviously I need to trim up some threads, but we've got the one side stitched in and top stitched. Okay, so now it is time to sew the other side together, and this is where I use the fold and the lines on my cutting mat to try to line everything up. This is another place I'm going to utilize my double-sided tape. So I'm going to go ahead and fold this in half and kind of try to line everything up here. Got my fold here and here, so those are lined up, but I want to be sure this is all lined up over here as well. So I got my folds here on this same line. We've got that good. Now the problem here is that if I sew it like this, I'm going to hit my zipper pull. And so at this point, I will open my zipper and kind of reline everything up here. Other problem though is as I start to feed this through my machine, if I just do it like this, even with pins, I have found that I end up with a gap right here that I don't like. And so what I end up doing is I'll pin this top part here, but then I use my double-sided tape to hold the zipper part in place. Just feeling for the top. So I'm going to take a piece, my double-sided tape, if I can find the end, lay it right along here. This is what I need to have held in place when I sew this down. So that is now stuck there. I'm going to line this part up. Obviously the teeth are going to line right there. So now this part is stuck down here. So when I sew this, my zipper is not going to shift. And then, even though it's double-sided taped, I'll still throw a few extra pins in there just because it's spandex and spandex doesn't like to stay put. All right, now that we've got this pinned and taped in place, we're going to bring it back over to the machine and we're going to sew these two pieces together. You've got your zipper stops right here. You can go on this side, you can go on this side. If you go on this side, you are going to be able to see the zipper stops externally. So just keep that in mind if you care. Just whatever you do, be careful when you sew around these that you don't hit it with your needle and break your needle. So now that that side is sewn, I've unpinned it, turned it inside out, and now I'm going to top stitch this seam down as well. I get down here by my zipper again. I'm just going to try to be extra careful. All right, so once you've got everything sewn up, this is kind of what your final product is going to look like. Here's your zipper right here. And then the next thing that we are going to do is sew in the elastic. So the first step to sewing in the elastic is to take your pieces and sew the edges together. So just like with our other waistband, we're going to zigzag this shut a few times. And call that good. right, and again, just like with our other waistband, we want to make sure that our elastic stretches evenly around it. So we're going to find the middle of our back by lining up the different pieces of our zipper pocket. And that's going to tell us where our back is. And we're going to go ahead and put a clip there. And we'll put a clip up here in the middle of the front. Now again, if you want to quarter this and quarter your elastic, you sure can. I generally don't, but you absolutely can. So now we're going to insert, I like to have this in the back. We're going to insert that into the waistband. And for this one, because we needed it ironed in half to line up everything, we've got a little bit more help guiding that placement. So you certainly could do that for your other waistband as well. So I've tucked that up into the top there. I'm going to put this in my machine. Make sure that everything stays lined up, because at the moment, of course, now it's not. Sometimes things shift as you put them into place. So you want to be sure it's where you put it before you start to sew. Okay. So I'm going to stretch my elastic a little bit. I'm just kind of eyeballing it at this point. Mostly just from practice, I kind of know how much I need to stretch. So I've just got a little bit of stretch there. Now, make sure it doesn't twist on you, because mine just tried to. Line up the piece that I had marked with my elastic on the inside and the outside. So now there, I've just grabbed it in my fingers, tucked my elastic up into the fold. Make sure that this is still up in the fold, and that these pieces down here lining up nicely, because that'll make your life easier later. Here, I've got this seam, tucked that up in there. Make sure that all of this is lined up down here. I'm going to come back to the back, stretch it out, make sure it's lined up. Just like with the other waistband, when I get back to the back, I'm going to sew over the stitching I already did. And that is done. Okay, so this is our finished waistband. And as you can see, we've got some extra fabric down here, and we're going to take care of that. But before I do that, I just kind of want to give you a little tour of this. What you're going to end up with is this zipper pocket here. And the way that I do my pockets is they are open all the way around. And I do that so that if you wanted, you could put a cord, string, a lock lace, new elastic in there without having to redo the entire thing. If you don't like that, if you don't like the thought of pockets being open all the way around because you're afraid things are going to shift, you could always, at this stage or even before, well, no, you'd have to do it now, take and run a stitch, oops, move that, take and run a stitch down here and down here, it's then not going to be open all the way around, so that is going to impede your ability to put in a lock lace or something like that. But you could always leave a channel at the top too if you wanted. And so now at this point, what I usually do is, to make my life a little bit easier, is I'll do this from the back side. Just kind of line everything up again using the lines on my cutting mat. And down here, you can see where you've got your excess, and I'm just going to cut that off. You can do it with scissors or your rotary cutter. So now your waistband is done. If you want, just like with the other waistband, before you sew it on, you can sew these edges together so that it's one seam that you're having to deal with. Sew these edges together. So it's one seam that you're having to deal with instead of two.